You and I have a rendezvous with destiny. We'll preserve for our children this, the last best hope of man on earth, or we'll sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness.
You take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday of getting back at you.
We're living in a very dangerous time right now, and liberalism has lost their cotton-picking mind.
The Trump folks, if they found out how we knew what we knew about the Trump staff's dealing with Russians, that they would try to compromise those sources and methods.
Nobody ever said anything about resisting Obama. They went at him on legitimate arguments.
I really do believe that much of what you saw coming out of Trump's mouth was a play from Putin's playbook.
Welcome to the Abolitionists Round Table, your all-access pass to exposing fake news, the resistance, and Barack Obama's shadow government undermining American progress. Be a part of the conversation at 734-822-1600. And now, your all-American hosts, Del Marsh and Phil Stargell.
And good morning. This is Phil Stargell. This is the Abolitionist Round Table of Michigan. And for people that like to simplify things, basically Art of Michigan. And we are modern day abolitionists, and we believe in the Constitution, we believe in America, and I would like to say this morning that I believe in this president that is coming under fire from every direction and every corner of ignorance and just racism. I mean, because there are 2 incidents that come to mind that just happened the other day. A young lady decides that sports is more about being used as a platform to prove that a white Republican men led by people like Donald Trump are nothing more than a bunch of racists. And I say, because this young lady happens to be a so-called African American, that's what she calls herself. I prefer not to call myself African American because I've never been to Africa. None of my people have ever been there. And but we won't get into that except to say that black people seem to be very, very interested in carrying the water for Democrats that are truly the party of racists. And I'm going to show you some proof of that by their own words. And then I want people to challenge the things that I say, because these things can be found by doing just a preliminary amount of research, just a little bit amount of research. All you have to do is look up Wikipedia on your computer, and you can find all of this information that I'm going to give you today. I chose that source because it is a source that has an abundance of information, but they lean a little bit to the left. And I say a little bit, it might be a little bit more than that. But I'm going to just give you the words of the people, and I want to challenge you listeners to ask the question: what is the use of us spending billions and billions of dollars in our education system, and we have a populace that believes that it is better to have a socialist-minded government than it is to have a liberty-minded government, a liberty-dedicated government that is backed up by documents that say that the people's liberty is the most important idea that we have. And they want to turn all of that over to people like Bernie Sanders, to people like Elizabeth Warren, and those people that are big government, socialist-minded people. This is just my rant. I want to get this off my chest this morning, because I'm going to be flying solo again this morning for a number of minutes, and because Dale Marsh is not in the studio right now, and there has been some problems with traffic this morning, so I'm going to ride a little bit without a wingman, and that gives me the liberty to take off of to stray from the agenda and put in my personal thoughts this morning, and so I'm going to continue with that until Dale gets here. But what I was just saying first of all, let me do this. I think this is the gentleman that I spoke with last week, and I want to put him on. Is he up already? Well, go ahead and put him up on line one.
Good morning, Phil.
Good morning.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing terrific.
Good. So we did talk last week, and I was curious if you did any research into Nathan Bedford Forrest and whether his statue should stay up. You thought that my question was a gotcha question, so I thought since you had the week to take a look at him, whether you use Google or encyclopedia or whatever.
I know of him, and I didn't feel that it was necessary for me to go any further in the fact that he was the enforcement arm of the Democrat Party. But
wait a minute. He was the head of the Ku Klux Klan. That was my question. And you said you would investigate that and get back. I just thought maybe you had already done that. So,
well,
if you haven't, then I want to agree with you on Donald Trump this week, which is pretty amazing because I generally disagree with you on everything. But now that he's working in a bipartisan way with Pelosi and Chuck Schumer to get some things done, it's the best thing Donald Trump's done since he took office.
Well, so personally, I think
I'm really happy to see that he's backing off of DACA. I'm really happy to see that he did the 3-month thing
well, I
got to tell you, he's turning me around.
Okay, but here's the thing. I think that for him to negotiate with Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer is a big mistake. But, he's the president. He can do what he feels he has to do to get what he wants done. What I say to you is the Democrats have a history of breaking the rules, ignoring law, and going to use their own ideas as to what this government is about. They ignore the law, and they've done it with the entry back into the Union after secession. They use people like Bedford to the head of the Klan.
I agree with you. I agreed with you last week. The Democrats were shameful up until the 1960s on race.
No,
we don't have to re-argue that.
They are still shameful on race.
That's a different subject.
They are still the same Democrat Party they were. Everything they do is to further their power, and what they did with Black America was to further their power. You act as if there was no Republican Party in the 1800s after slavery.
There totally was. The Republicans were totally right on race in the 1800s.
Yes.
In the 1900s.
And so you're going to tell me that the Republicans changed their position after the civil rights legislation in 1964?
Absolutely.
Well, tell me how that happens, because they were for the rights and protecting the rights and giving the rights to people. Let me just give you some of. Let me just give you some.
No,
of
wait,
the,
hang on 1 second.
No. I want you to listen to this. I want you to listen to this.
Hang on. You were talking about Donald Trump, and I agree with you on him. He's starting to make progress. He's starting to do some good things, but it's because he's working with the Democrats.
He's working with snakes
anymore.
He's working with snakes. The snakes, very snakes that he wants to put out of the swamp. The very people. He's working with snakes. But let me tell you.
Well, he's
wait a minute. Listen.
The Republicans can't pass anything.
I want you. Since you gave me a question about the head of the Klan, I want to give you the person that was the power. The Klan was the muscle. This is the power. Pitchfork Ben Tillman. Here's what he said. We tried to overcome the 30,000 majority by honest methods. 30,000 majority. You know what that 30,000 majority was?
No, I don't.
It was black Americans voting Republican during the period after Reconstruction. Benjamin Ryan Tillman, was the governor of South Carolina from 1890 to 1894. And then he was a Senate from then for the rest of his life until he died, much like Robert Byrd of West Virginia.
Yep, shameful.
Okay, now
no argument.
Here's what I'm telling you.
I'm not arguing with you that Democrats have been shameful on race in the past. Can I ask why?
Let me tell you. What does this say?
Why do they vote in huge numbers for Democrats?
No, but listen to this. What does this say? The Democrat Party means the white man is supreme. The Democrat Party, okay? And we intend at any and all hazards to retain it. He says, how did we recover our liberty? By fraud and by violence. Benjamin Ryan Tillman. Okay, now, when did they change that policy?
When did they change that policy?
Yeah, when did they change that policy?
I guess they must have changed it because Democrats generally grab about 92% of the African American vote. So
they were getting that. They were getting that shortly after that.
Unless you say that African Americans are ignorant, I would guess that they have changed their policy.
I say that they will believe anything white Democrats tell them.
Wow.
All of this comes from the colleges and the education system that was dominated by Democrat-led union members. Once we allowed our high schools and our colleges to be taken over by the unions, that's what the reason why we have people believing that the Democrats and the Republicans changed positions after 1964. Do you know how long it took before a Republican was put in as governor of one of the Deep South states?
No. It
was another 25 years.
Okay.
Okay, and so what I'm telling you is that Republicans, white Republicans and black Republicans, you understand, they were a coalition from the time that blacks were freed until 1964. Okay, that's when black people decided that the government led by the Democrats were more in their interest, and that's when they started voting Democrat. Not just because of the civil rights move, but because of the great society that Lyndon Johnson put in to start giving government money to people for no other reason than to buy votes. That's what the change was.
So what you're saying is that African American voters only vote Democrat because, one, they're ignorant, or two, they get their votes bought. Is
that's what you said, and that's what the Democrats say.
Okay.
That's because Johnson, you know what do you know what Johnson said when he signed that bill?
Yep, he said I've lost a whole generation.
No, he said I'm gonna have these N-words voting Democrat for the next 200
he said,
years.
I lost the South for a whole generation.
He said I will have those N's voting Democrat for the next 200 years. That's
and he also
what
said I lost the South for a whole generation. Go look it up.
How could he have lost it? How could he have lost it when it took 25 years before another Republican was voted in as a governor?
Phil, I got to go to work.
Thanks a lot for your call, and call back. We can go around and around with this. Okay, here we go. Now, what I'm saying to you is this whole idea of Democrats as the protector of civil rights and the giver of civil rights, they're the same Democrats that filibustered the civil rights legislation when the Republicans put in that same bill that Johnson put in, and they tried to put that bill through, and the southern states blocked it. They had to make sure that they kept the legislation passed by Republicans to a minimum until they could, through intimidation and through violence, through hanging, lynchings, and just flat out thuggery, till they could recover and close the gap of 30,000 votes that black Americans put into the Republican Party during the Reconstruction period. And once they were able to overcome that majority, then they went into the Congress and into the Senate, and then they started to do things that would allow them to turn the South not into a slave state, but into a parole state from slavery. They just allowed black people to go home after their work session instead of having them on the plantation. That's the only difference between Jim Crow South and slavery South, bondage South, the Deep South. And so when people tell you that the legislation of 1964 is what made black Americans vote Democrat, I say to you, no, it was the 1964 or 65 legislation that was the war on poverty that took the males out of the house of black America and took away the fathers from the homes and put them into a position where they were almost totally dependent on the government. And that's where we are today. And now what we see is the Democrats playing the same games with the law, with illegal immigration. They're doing everything they can to make sure that nobody follows the law on this illegal immigration, because they know that all they have to do is get a bunch of illegals into the country, and they're going to vote Democrat because they're going to open up the coffers of Washington, D.C. and give every dime in the Treasury of the hard-earned money that are being earned by the working people of this country that have been hoodwinked into believing that the Democrat Party is for the little guy. Their Democrat Party is for the greedy guy. That's who they are for, and that's who they've always been for. And the South has always used slave labor. And they like I said, the Ku Klux Klan was only one thing, the enforcement arm of the bad ideas that the Democrats put around. And if you don't believe it, just look at what the situation was that precipitated the civil rights legislation. The South would not allow black Americans to join into the trade unions. Those garbage workers that Martin Luther King was down there marching for, they would not allow representation from the trade unions, from the carpenters, the Teamsters, and all of those. Those unions did not want black Americans in them, and they kept them out. That's how come those black guys that got killed in the back of that truck were using the truck as a shelter from the rain. And that's how they ended up dying. And then there was nobody that would represent these garbage workers. There was unions there, but they weren't allowed to participate in them. That's when they came up with the garbage workers union and all of that, and those were special socialist-minded groups of that union, because the South really was always anti-union, so they had to come up with a better situation for the black numbers. And once they came up with the service workers union, and AFSCME and all of that, those are the things that took over from the carpenters and the Teamsters and those traditional unions, who were segregationists, because that was what was going on in the South. Today, black Americans swear by the unions, but the unions have been and always will be looking out for number one and their numbers. That's the most important thing. That's how come they have no problem with rehabilitating the illegals when they come into the country. They said at one time that they were against illegals coming in, but they knew that once they got the numbers, then they could. It's all about numbers. It always has been. The Democrat Party is only concerned with numbers. That's why, when people say that the Democrat Party is the party of the little guy, just look back at over the years and look at how the Democrat Party and the unions were against every ethnic group that came into this country. They were against the Irish. They were against the Italians. They were against the Chinese, the Orientals. They were against every last one of the groups, the Indians. They were against all of those. They excluded them, every last one of them, until they needed their numbers to make up the majority. Then they started to welcome them. The things that people like Ben Tillman said about black people in the years after slavery, during the Reconstruction years, tells you that the Democrat Party has been the party of life. But the one thing that's never changed is the name Democrat, the Democrat Party. It hasn't changed. It is the oldest political group in the world. There's no other continuous group that has been organized as under one name as the Democrat Party. They have the world's record on this. And so that tells you that they are not ashamed of their past, but they do everything they can do to hide that past. That's why it's so important that we do not allow these people to tear down these statues and these monuments. Well, we're going to continue why they shouldn't allow them to tear down these monuments, and I'll explain to you why. If you'd like to join this conversation, that number is 734-822-1600. We'll be right back after these messages.
Sempre un amabile, leggiadro viso, in pianto il riso.
You're listening to the Abolitionists Round Table with your hosts, Del and Phil. They're exposing the left's underground resistance while leading the charge in the fight for liberty. Join the conversation at 734-822-1600.
And we are back, and I just want to say this real quickly. I believe that the whole idea of what reasons there are 90-plus percentage voting for Democrats, for whatever reason, I believe that it's a thing of the Black Americans wanting to participate in the abundance of America, but they really were never given the opportunity by Democrats. Democrats done everything they could from the beginning of freedom and liberty of Black Americans in America. They done everything to thwart that. They done everything they can. And I mean, there are very simple ways you can check what I'm saying. The Democrat Party stood in the way. That's why I'm telling you that I did this research that I have through Wikipedia, because it is a bunch of information right there. It is not hidden, but they don't go into depth on it. There are references where you can go into depth and find this out. But if you look at the information there, you can only come to one conclusion: that Democrat Party is not, and never has been, and probably never will be, looking out for the interests of Black people, Hispanic people, Mexican people, women, homosexuals, or anything. They could care less. They just want their vote to get to that magic 51% to continue their power. That's all they care about. And if you don't believe it, just look up Wikipedia and look up things like Ben Tillman. He will tell you what they did and why they did it. It was to suppress the vote of Black Americans. It was to keep Black Americans subservient and keep them in the position of inferiority. I'm going to go to the lines, and then I'm going to get back to that. We're going to go to Jenny on line 2. Good morning, Jenny.
Morning, Phil. How you doing?
I'm doing terrific. Great to hear from you early this morning.
Yeah, I just love your show. I just really do, and I try to listen to it every week.
Well, thank you. We love having you in the audience.
Well, I just want to say I'm one of the disagreeing people these days. I do not like what Trump did. I do not like that he is even messing with Pelosi and Schumer.
Yeah.
I just don't. And if we don't get this wall, some kind of a wall, whether it be electronic or physical or whatever, if we don't get this done, this country's gone.
Well, yeah, I agree. And so that's why you and I have to do what we did. We have to show our interest in what we want, and we have elected a majority, and we've got to get those people to understand that they have to get that agenda done. It is not in our benefit for Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell to say things like, that's not on our agenda. That's not what we consider to be important right now. You're not the president. You are one of 100 and one of a majority of Republicans in a 500-member body. And it is not, you don't make the decisions. You get the people together and decide what the people want and do it. and the president will give you guidance on what it is. You shouldn't be talking about, I don't, that's not my agenda. I don't agree with him on that. Okay, you better be agreeing with the people, or we're going to let you know in November. And that's what people ought to be saying. I don't like the idea that Trump is negotiating with Nancy Pelosi and that's a snake Chuck Schumer, because these guys, like I just mentioned, they care only about one thing: gaining and retaining power. These people are maniacs about power, and so that's so what we have to do is make it known to them that they are going to do what we want, and they better be more afraid of us than they are the Democrats, because that's what has been the case all of these years. They're so afraid of being called racist. But what do? They are the people that have the proven record of being racist. I'm reading this to you right now about what their record is. And black Americans ignore that record, and they take more wrath out on Republicans than they do on the people that enslaved them, that put them in under Jim Crow laws. And
well, yeah.
So,
I used to be I was a Democrat.
Yes.
And I really wasn't as liberal as some people, but I was liberal, and but in 2008 I heard Obama's campaign speech, and I said, I got to get out of this thing. I just got to get out, because this is where we're going. We're going in the wrong way.
Well,
and he sounded to me like a used car salesman.
Yeah, and see, they call Republicans racist and white supremacists and all that, and there has never been any legislation anywhere or any attempt to put any legislation across with the intent on preserving a position of privilege for white people by the Republican Party. But it is always, and here's the guy's words, the whites have absolute control of the state government, and we intend at any and all hazards to retain it.
Well,
listen to this.
I became a conservative, and I'm disillusioned now. Not that I'll never go back the other way, but these people, I don't understand them. Tim Walberg does not represent us.
Right, and that's why we have got to do what we did when we stood up and opposed the Obama administration. We have to oppose these congressmen who come before us every 2 years. We have got to weed them out. We have got to put them out. If they're not defending the policies and the planks of the platform of the Republican Party, then they should go. They need to be in a Democrat Party.
Amen. And on the ballot box is the best way for me to do it.
Yes.
But I just don't understand. And I like Trump, and I voted for him, but I don't understand.
Well, here's what I believe, and I was going to say I'm hoping, but I believe this. I believe that when Trump went into the negotiation and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer come out the next day and said that, they got what they want and this, that, and the other, and he came right out and said, wait a minute, there ain't no deal. What he was doing, in my estimation, was just proving to everybody what these snakes are. They think that they are able to push their will through because they have as many people in the Republican Party in key positions to be obstructionists that they feel that they can come out and say that we got him in a bag and we're running this agenda. I think Trump was trying to say, no, you're not running the agenda, but you may be able to run the agenda if I don't get these guys off of their rear ends and get something done on this side of it that we want to get done.
I hope so, sir. I hope that's what it is, because I really don't know, and I'm not happy.
Well, I'm not happy. I'm not happy either, because first thing, Trump did do something that I consider to be terrific. He said that, this young lady that said that he was a white supremacist. At least Trump knows what a white supremacist is. The white supremacists are the people that tell you that they are white supremacists. And we need to get behind Trump and stop allowing Democrats to call him these names, because he is not a white supremacist. The only white supremacists that have ever brought their heads out have been Democrats. They are the only ones that pass laws to enshrine white supremacy in a government that they control. White Republicans have never done that, and it's about time that black Americans like myself stand up and defend them just as hard as black Americans that are Democrats defend the racist, white supremacist Democrats, because that's what they're doing when they oppose legislation put up by Republicans, because Democrats will never propose any legislation that is constitutional. And that's how come we have to root out these people, clean out this swamp, get rid of some of these judges that agree with what the Democrat Party is doing. And the only way we can do it is we got to get behind somebody that's willing to stand up and defend himself, and not allow these people to call him a racist and a white supremacist. When white supremacists, I'm going to give you what the white supremacists really thought about black Americans.
Yeah, I just really appreciate, the teaching I get on shows like yours, because I didn't. There was a lot of things I didn't know before 2009.
Yeah, and like I said, if you just look up in the Wikipedia, and the reason why I do this is, like I said, Wikipedia is acknowledged as being a little left of center, universally acknowledged, but they do at least put some of this information out there. You can find it, and I suggest that people look at it and see, because you're going to find things like black people owned slaves during slavery, and then black people also, when they left. Did you see the movie Color Purple?
Yeah, I read the book.
Okay.
And I saw it, and I have the movie, and I still have it. I read the book. Yeah. It was an interesting book.
Now, did you notice in the movie? I don't know if you saw the movie, but in the movie at the end they had Whoopi Goldberg going back to Africa, right?
Yeah.
But they never said anything about the fact that the laws that those former slaves enacted upon taking control of a portion of Liberia, what became Liberia, they put in the same type of laws that the white, racist, white supremacist governments in the South, the Jim Crow South, they put the same type of laws on those fellow Africans when they got to Liberia. Now, what I say to you is, black people didn't vote Democrat exclusively just after the Civil Rights Bill. They were Democrats all along. And why? Because anybody in this whole world is more susceptible to a government that is willing to use force, that is willing to starve you, that is willing to do whatever. Those people will comply with those laws. That's why it is so important that when we allow people to come into this country, that they want to be in this country because they want to be Americans, not bring the old country traditions into this country, because every country on the face of this earth is tyrannical compared to what America is. We in this country were founded on liberty, and we have tried to keep it that way. If we allow the Democrats to take power, we can kiss liberty goodbye.
Well, as long as there's a bunch of people, and I can say this because I happen to be blind. I can't see with my eyes, okay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I got a brain.
Yes.
And I'm sorry to tell you this, but we got the same thing going in the quote-unquote blind community, which to me isn't much of a community. But anyway, there's a whole bunch of people that have went that way too. Democrat, because it's good. They think it's good for them because they like to. The blind people too. A lot of them like to be victims, and it's wrong.
Yeah, and that's self-preservation type of thing, and this is what Black America has. I mean, they are the poster child for so-called self-preservation, but there becomes a time when you have to look at the intent of people, not as to be because they hate you, but because they understand that in order for you to achieve all you can achieve, you have to have the freedom. And the Democrats don't want to do that. They will give you what you might think is something that help you along the way, but they want something in return. And generally, that's votes first. Once they get the vote, they always talk about one man, one vote. Well, Democrats have patented the idea of one man, one vote, one time. Once we take power, we will put in laws that you will never vote for anybody else. And that's what socialism does. And
well, I know what socialism is, and I have studied Hitler and all that stuff even before I became a conservative. And what people don't realize, if you study history, why are you voting for people like this? If a lot of people just ignore history.
Well, one of the things is just look at the blind rush to embrace Bernie Sanders. He says, okay, I'm going to make it so that all college is free. Okay, now these young kids, I mean, they just love that idea. I mean, I can understand it. I can understand it, but I can't understand why anybody would sign a devil's agreement with the devil in order to wipe out a little bit of a debt that the Democrats are responsible for making in the first place. I mean, it's their ideas that have made the acquisition of a college degree so costly that the average person can't afford it, so they had to borrow money and put themselves in debt for the rest of their life. Yeah, I can understand people voting for it, but I wouldn't do it. But I mean, there are people that will do anything for a block of cheese and a can of pork.
Well, the thing is, though, it's not even common sense. Mm-hmm. Universal health care, free college, raising up the minimum wage, somebody's got to pay for it.
Well, yeah, and guess what? you know, we see it. I mean, this free health care, guess what? It ain't free. My personal story is my insurance has gone from $212 a month to $800 plus a month, and that's just me and my wife. That is just incredible. And so I you know, and nobody can tell me that that Obamacare is any kind of way free. That's
no, sir.
You know, so.
I mean, I'm a senior citizen, so mine isn't too bad, but mine has gone up. But you know, I've seen, like, my sister-in-law, they priced the Obamacare market priced her out of insurance.
Sure, that's the whole idea. They want to get you out of what he said you can keep, but if you can't afford it, I don't know how he expects you to keep it. But it's all lies. I mean, it's the Democrat Party is the party of lies and the party of racism. I mean, and they've gotten away with it because they tell you that we're gonna give you this, we're gonna give you that. They'll give you anything for your vote. Like I said, once they get that vote and get in there and start making rules, then you'll find out. And so anyway, Jenny, I certainly appreciate you waking up early with me this morning, and be listening a little later on in the afternoon, and you'll hear me again.
Oh, okay. And you know what? I really appreciate you, and thank you for everything you do. And I've learned an awful lot since 2008.
Well, I certainly appreciate you being in the audience, and you've been in the audience for a while, and I certainly appreciate it.
Okay, well, God bless you, and take care.
Thank you. Bye now.
All righty.
And so I'm going to give you a couple of more things because we're getting down close to the end of the show, but what I wanted to do was give you some examples. First of all, let me say this. I believe that racism and you know, you've heard people say, "Oh, racism is everywhere. It's always going to be with us." No, real racism is non-existent in this country because there is a reply to every incident of racism. The real racism is by guys like Ben Tillman, who said things like the Negro is never going to be the equal of the white man. That's racism. There has never been any Republican that has publicly said anything like that. Ben Tillman said that in the United States Senate because he had the backing of 11 other states of the former Confederacy, plus some of the border states, like Nebraska, like some of the other states that came into the Union after this attempted secession. So these guys were telling you what they meant as being white supremacists. It has nothing to do with people like Donald Trump, because they have never said any. I'm going to give you some more of this. I'm going to give you a whole list of things as the day goes on, because I will see you at 2 o'clock this afternoon. The Abolitionist Round Table invites the Wham! Talk 1600 listeners to continue the roundtable discussions by mailing correspondence to Art of Michigan, Post Office Box 135, Garden City, Michigan 48135.
Or follow Phil and Del at artofmichigan.com. You can also send emails to artofmichigan@hotmail.com. And most of all, continue to listen every Saturday and tell a friend.